Rain fell in fine, cold sheets as Detective Callum Vance stepped under the yellow police tape. The alley behind 9th and Market was dimly lit by a flickering street lamp, its light reflecting in oily puddles. The body was face down beside a dumpster, arms splayed unnaturally, no visible wounds, no wallet. But the strangest thing Vance noted was how clean the man was. No blood, no bruising, no defensive marks. As if he'd simply stopped existing mid-step. The coroner shook his head. No ID, no prints, like he was never here. The alley was cordoned off quickly. Vance's partner, Jules, combed the nearby dumpster and trash bins, turning up only a half-smoked cigarette of a brand neither recognized. No personal effects. No phone. The victim wore a sleek black coat, expensive looking but with no label. His shoes were polished. Whoever he was, he didn't belong in this part of town. No eyewitnesses had come forward yet, and surrounding security cams appeared conveniently pointed elsewhere. It wasn't just a murder. It felt like a message. Back at headquarters, Vance studied the autopsy photos. Still nothing to identify the man. No fingerprints. No hits in the system. No scars or tattoos. Dental records yielded nothing, and DNA returned no matches in domestic or international databases. "We got a John Doe who doesn't legally exist," Jules muttered. Vance leaned in. He existed. Someone just made sure the world forgot him. That night, Callum couldn't shake the image of the body. Something about the expression. Not terror, not pain relief. The rain hadn't stopped, and neither had the questions. Vance returned to the scene under nightfall, searching for anything the forensic team might have missed. In a crack in the brick wall, he found it, a torn piece of fabric, slick with rain, matching the man's coat. Embedded in it, barely noticeable, was a tiny thread of copper wire. "What the hell were you carrying?" Vance whispered. He bagged the evidence and headed to a private contact who might know more. The forensics guy owed Vance a favor and analyzed the copper wire overnight. "Surveillance grade," he said. This was no ordinary thread. It's lined with encrypted memory filament, the kind only military or espionage circles use. And if I had to guess, this guy was wearing more than just a coat. Vance exhaled slowly, the weight of something much larger beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a dead body. This was a ghost, and someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make sure he stayed that way. The next morning, Vance's mind was already racing as he sat alone at the cafe across from the precinct. His phone buzzed, a message from Jules. Still no ID. Ran facial recognition globally. Nothing. Vance scrolled through the case, photos again. Every detail now screamed deliberate erasure. Whoever the man was, someone had gone to enormous lengths to wipe him from every system. And yet, they missed a wire. A mistake. Or maybe a breadcrumb left behind. He returned to the lab and asked the forensics tech to go deeper. "Try cracking the encryption on the wire," Vance said. The tech shook his head. "You're asking for something that could flag national security protocols. I could lose my clearance." Vance gave him a look. "Just do it off-grid." 2 hours later, the tech called back, rattled. "It's part of something called Silence Protocol. Classified, black-level stuff. I couldn't crack it. But the data isn't just encrypted. It's reactive, like it can self-delete if tampered with." Vance knew he needed help beyond normal channels. He visited a contact from his past, Mara Lynn, a former NSA analyst turned conspiracy blogger. Her apartment was wall-to-wall with monitors and scribbled notes. When he showed her the wire, her eyes widened. "I've seen references to Silence Protocol before. Rumors only. Supposed to be a fail-safe program for covert assets who go rogue. They get deleted from all records, digitally and physically." Vance frowned. So this guy was one of them? Mara leaned in. If he was trying to escape Silence Protocol, then he didn't just die. He was executed. And if this breadcrumb survived, it means someone's breaking the protocol from the inside. That makes whoever did it a major threat to the system. Vance's mind spun. An invisible war beneath the surface, where spies weren't just killed, they were erased like ghosts. And someone inside was sabotaging it. Before leaving, Mara handed him a printed string of code extracted from a few fragments she could read on the wire. It was coordinates, encrypted but partial. A starting point. "This could lead to the handler," she whispered. "Or the next target." As Vance stepped into the rain, clutching the code, he realized a man who never existed had just opened a door to a secret far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Vance sat alone in his apartment that night. The city lights dimmed through the blinds. The printed coordinates from Mara Lynn sat on his desk, mocking him. He deciphered the partial string, isolating what looked like a location marker in Alaska, remote, off-grid, unremarkable. "Why there?" he whispered. He dug deeper, cross-referencing military databases, archive maps, and satellite images. One small structure kept appearing and disappearing over the years. A cabin nestled between two cliffs near the Kuskokwim River. It wasn't officially listed, but records of power usage hinted someone had lived there briefly and recently. With his leave of duty form already on file as burnout leave, Vance boarded a flight under an alias the next morning. The further he flew from the city, the quieter his thoughts became. By the time he landed in Anchorage, the air felt sharper, the silence deeper. He rented a Jeep and drove through snow-dusted roads for hours until signs of civilization disappeared altogether. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was trespassing into someone else's forgotten past. Satellite GPS dropped out 20 miles from the destination. He switched to compass navigation. The sun was low when he reached the cabin. It was exactly like the old satellite scans, modest, made of timber, windows covered with blackout curtains. No vehicles, no sign of life, but the lock was new. Fresh tire marks half buried in snow showed someone had been here not long ago. Vance scanned the perimeter, taking photos and making mental notes. There were cameras, well hidden but dead, purposefully disabled. Someone had tried to bury this place, then changed their mind and walked away. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A single table with dismantled hard drive, a wall filled with redacted documents and photographs, some torn. A cot, cold and used. Whoever had stayed here didn't sleep much. Vance noticed a name repeatedly scratched into papers. Elias V. March. It wasn't familiar, but judging from how often it appeared, sometimes underlined, sometimes circled, it was important. Was Elias the handler? Or another operative? On the back of a Polaroid pinned to the wall, Vance found a note in red ink. "You found me too late. He's already in motion." The photo showed the faceless man, the John Doe, standing beside a person whose face was burned out with acid or fire. The message was clear. The man who never existed was never working alone. Someone else was still out there, continuing his mission. The silence wasn't over. It had only just begun. The wind howled against the cabin as Vance sat at the lone table, sifting through the disassembled hard drive pieces. They were beyond field repair, purposefully destroyed. He snapped photos, hoping to recover serial numbers later. Among the wreckage, he found a sliver of a memory card jammed between two panels. He pocketed it without hesitation. With the light fading, he carefully recovered his tracks, leaving the cabin as he'd found it. He didn't plan to return, but someone else might. That night, he camped a mile away in his Jeep, half sleeping with a pistol resting on his chest. Back in Anchorage the next day, Vance found a nondescript electronics repair shop run by an old contact from his Army days, Dimitri. After some haggling and explaining, Dimitri agreed to extract data from the shattered memory card. The wait was agonizing. Vance paced while the machine hummed. "Most of it's corrupted," Dimitri finally said, "but there's one video file, encrypted but openable with the right tool." Vance's fingers trembled slightly as the screen flickered to life. The video began with static, then revealed a grainy image of a dim room. Bare walls, one light, and a man bound to a chair. The camera shifted to show a second man, speaking directly into the lens. Vance recognized him immediately. Elias V. March. The voice was calm, clinical. "This man," Elias said, motioning to prisoner, "was a contractor tasked with enforcing the silence protocol. He failed. There was no anger, no violence, just facts delivered with surgical precision. Others will take his place." Vance rewound the video, watching every detail. There were no dates, no location identifiers, just a tone of cold inevitability. But one thing stood out. On the wall behind Elias was a reflection, an emblem partially obscure but distinct. Vance knew it from an old operation in Belgium, a defunct biotech company tied to black budget research. That operation was officially buried, and yet here it was, in a video not meant to be found. That night, Vance returned to his hotel and began building a wall of evidence. Photos, screenshots, coordinates, strings of names. The silence protocol was bigger than he thought. Far more than rogue agents or broken experiments. It was a machine, and Elias March was one of its architects. If he wanted answers, he'd need to find Elias. But first, he had to follow the emblem. It was the only lead not burned. The emblem led Vance to Brussels, a city where ancient architecture masked modern secrets. The biotech company, once called Virion Labs, had shuttered a decade ago after allegations of human trials gone wrong. Officially, the building had been condemned. But as Vance stood across the street under a soft drizzle, he noted signs of recent activity. Fresh tire marks on the overgrown driveway, a flickering camera above the entrance, and subtle light bleeding through blacked-out windows. Someone was still here. He waited until twilight. Armed with only a flashlight, lockpick kit, and a sidearm, Vance crept through a rusted side door. Inside, the air was thick with chemicals and mildew. Long corridors stretched endlessly, lined with shattered glass and collapsed ceiling tiles. Amid the decay, he found working power cables running along the wall, patched in recently. Following them like breadcrumbs, he came upon a room surprisingly intact. Clean walls, functioning terminals, even a humming server rack. Whoever maintained this had purpose. A terminal still logged and revealed research logs, dense files of DNA sequences, brain mapping procedures, and biometric algorithms. One project was titled Echo Core, another Project Perseid. Both were flagged suspended Directive March. Vance downloaded everything he could onto a drive. A live chat box popped up suddenly. The text read, "You shouldn't be here." He froze. Another message followed. "We're watching." He bolted from the lab, retracing his steps. But the building had changed. Hallways he'd passed were now blocked. Lights flickered ominously. His breath quickened. As he turned a corner, a shadow moved. Vance raised his weapon, backing toward the exit. A loud clang rang behind him. Something heavy fell. He burst through the same door he entered, sprinting into the rain. No one followed, or so he thought. Back at his rent apartment, he scrubbed the downloaded data, searching for anything that could connect Elias March to these projects. A name surfaced, Dr. Ilse Räikkönen, listed as lead researcher. She'd vanished from public records in 2016. According to the logs, she last accessed the system 5 days ago. Vance knew she was his next link. The question now wasn't what the silence protocol was doing, it was how deep it had already spread. Vance tracked Dr. Ilse Räikkönen's last known location to a small coastal town in Norway, Alesund, a place where fjords cut deep into the earth and fog often swallowed whole streets. The cold air bit through his jacket as he stepped off the ferry, feeling a rare chill that wasn't just from the weather. He had learned early on that people connected to the silence protocol rarely vanished by chance. They were either hiding or hiding something more sinister. He checked into a modest inn near the harbor and began digging through local records. Ilse's name had been scrubbed clean from official databases, but whispers lingered. Stories from fishermen about a woman who bought an old research vessel, rumored to be outfitted with experimental tech. Curious locals avoided the docks at night, hinting at strange noises and flickering lights. Vance's gut told him this was no coincidence. The next evening, Vance boarded the vessel at dusk, slipping past the locked gates. Inside, the ship's lab was a stark contrast of weather-beaten exterior, spotless surfaces, humming machines, and monitors displaying cryptic graphs. Ilse's digital signature was unmistakable on one of the active terminals. She was still experimenting, pushing boundaries. The log showed attempt to synthesize something called neurophage, a biological agent designed to interface directly with human cognition. Suddenly, the power flickered, and the ship's PA crackled to life with a voice distorted beyond recognition. "You are not authorized to be here. Leave or be terminated." Vance felt the weight of a trap closing in. The vessel's internal door started sealing off sections, forcing him deeper into the maze of labs and storage. He needed to find Ilse before the silence became permanent. In the ship's secluded control room, Vance found a hidden message embedded in the logs, a plea for help signed by Ilse herself. She claimed the project had spiraled out of control, with shadowy operatives manipulating her work for unknown ends. Her voice trembled to the recording, confessing fear for her own life and the world's future. Vance realized this was no longer just a hunt. It was a race against an invisible enemy wielding technology far beyond his imagination. The hidden message lingered in Vance's mind as he navigated the ship's labyrinthine corridors. Each step echoed the feeling of being watched, the shadows thickening around him. He realized that Ilsa's warnings weren't just paranoia. They were directives. Someone else was controlling the ship remotely, orchestrating every lock and light. The silence protocol was active here, and breaking it could cost him everything. In the lab's deepest vault, Vance uncovered a series of cryogenic chambers. Empty but humming with residual energy, the chambers appear designed to hold human subjects in stasis, possibly for neurological experiments linked to neurophage. A photograph taped to one console showed Ilsa standing beside a man whose face was scratched out. The image suggested a personal stake, a mystery beyond mere science. His investigation was cut short by the sudden activation of the ship's security drones. Sleek, black machines with glowing red eyes hovered silently, tracking his movements. Vance ducked behind a stack of equipment as lasers scanned the hallway. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. He knew if he was captured, the secrets of the silence protocol would vanish with him. Using a small EMP device from his coat, Vance disabled one drone, creating a brief window to sprint toward the control room. The ship's AI flickered and sputtered under the assault, but automated defenses retaliated with reinforced lockdowns. Time was running out, and every corner hid new threats engineered to silence intruders forever. Back in the control room, Vance accessed a secure terminal and downloaded encrypted data about the silence protocol's real purpose. It was more than a covert operation. It was a plan to erase specific individuals from history by altering memories and records. Ilsa's work on neurophage wasn't just about cognition. It was about rewriting reality itself. The stakes had never been higher. Vance's mind raced as he decrypted the files, uncovering layers of conspiracy buried beneath the surface. The silence protocol wasn't just a tool of espionage. It was a weapon designed to erase dissidents, rewriting their existence in the minds of friends, family, and governments. Entire lives could be wiped clean, replaced by fabricated histories. The true power wasn't in killing. It was in making people never have existed at all. He found dossiers on dozens of individuals marked for erasure, including political activists, scientists, and whistleblowers who had stumbled onto the project. Among them was a name that sent a jolt through Vance, Dr. Elena Myrov, his own sister. She had disappeared 5 years ago without a trace, presumed dead or missing. Now Vance faced the terrifying possibility that she had been a victim of the very protocol he was chasing. Suddenly, a low hum filled the control room. The ship's AI had reactivated, issuing a cold, mechanical voice. Unauthorized access detected. Protocol enforcement initiated. The doors sealed with a hiss, and emergency lights bathed the room in a harsh red glow. Vance's time was running out. The ship was sealing itself off, preparing to eliminate any threats to its mission. Thinking quickly, Vance located a hidden maintenance hatch that led to the ship's underbelly, tight tunnels filled with cabling and piping. Crawling to the claustrophobic space, he heard the distant thrum of engines shifting course. Whoever controlled the ship was mobilizing for escape or destruction. Vance had to stop them before the data and the secrets vanished forever. Emerging from the tunnels, Vance found himself near the ship's command deck, where a shadowy figure stood silhouetted against the window overlooking the fjords. The figure turned slowly, revealing a familiar face, Dr. Ilsa Räikkönen, but her eyes held a coldness, a resolve that hinted at betrayal. "You shouldn't have come here, Vance," she said quietly. "Some truths are too dangerous to survive." Vance's heart pounded as he stared at Ilsa, the woman he once trusted now standing before him as an adversary. Her cold gaze betrayed no emotion, but her words cut deeper than any blade. "You don't understand the bigger picture," she whispered. "This project isn't about erasing people. It's about controlling the future." She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial tone. "With neurophage, we can rewrite reality itself, shape history to prevent chaos." Doubt warred with disbelief inside Vance. Could Ilsa truly believe that rewriting memories and erasing lives was a necessary sacrifice for order? He remembered the sister he lost, the warmth in her smile, and he knew the truth must be darker than this. Yet the evidence before him was undeniable. The silence protocol was already in motion, and millions of lives could be altered without their knowledge. Ilsa turned abruptly and moved to the main console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "You're too late, Vance. The protocol is irreversible now. We just need to finish the last stage and everything will be set." The ship's engines thrummed louder, signaling a countdown to launch. Vance realized this wasn't just about data. It was a race against time to stop the erasure of reality itself. Frustration and desperation fueled his resolve. Vance lunged for the console, trying to wrest control away from Ilsa. They grappled, the struggle a blur of shadows and sparks. In that moment, Vance glimpsed a vulnerability behind her steely exterior, a flicker of hesitation, regret even. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You don't understand what's at stake," she hissed, shoving him back. Wounded but determined, Vance retreated to the ship's auxiliary systems. He needed another way to stop the countdown, to prevent the launch that could rewrite history. Searching frantically, he found an override sequence buried deep within the code, a last resort safeguard meant to be used only in emergencies. With trembling hands, he began inputting the command, knowing that failure meant oblivion for countless innocents. The override sequence began to take hold, but the system was fighting back. Vance's fingers flew over controls, sweat slicking his brow as alarms blared throughout the ship. The silence protocol's core was deeply embedded in the neural network. It resisted every attempt to halt it. Come on, Vance muttered, eyes darting between lines of code streaming faster than he could comprehend. The fate of reality balanced on this fragile digital thread. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing him against the console. Ilsa's voice crackled over the intercom, calm but menacing. "You don't have to do this, Vance. We can fix the chaos together, build a new order." Her words echoed, but Vance's mind was locked on the mission. He couldn't allow the rewriting of lives and histories to become permanent. Every erased memory was a stolen truth, a person wiped from existence. With a surge of determination, Vance bypassed the main firewall and accessed the backup systems. He found a hidden archive containing encrypted logs, proof of the project's origin and the true motives behind the Silence Protocol. The data exposed a conspiracy deeper than anyone suspected. Government officials and corporate magnates willing to sacrifice freedom for control. Vance's heart sank. He was up against a shadow empire. Suddenly, a cold realization hit him. Ilsa wasn't just an agent. She was a victim, too, brainwashed and trapped within her own beliefs. Vance hesitated, wondering if saving her was possible or if she'd become the protocol's most dangerous weapon. He had to act fast. The countdown was dangerously close to zero, and the ship's corridors began to flood with eerie blue emergency lights. Ignoring his doubts, Vance raced to the central server room. Every second counted. As he approached the terminal, the final override interface awaited him, a digital lock requiring a biometric code. His hand hovered, the weight of what he was about to do crushing. With a deep breath, he pressed his palm to the scanner, praying his actions would restore what was lost and end the silence before it consumed everything. The biometric scanner accepted Vance's palm, and the final override sequence initiated. The ship's core hummed louder, a deep mechanical roar that filled every corner of the vessel. Data cascaded across the screens, lines of code reversing the Silence Protocol's effects one by one. But the system fought back, triggering lockdowns and firewalls that threatened to sever his connection. Vance's knuckles whitened as he battled the digital fortress, each keystroke a desperate bid to reclaim control. In the corridors, the emergency lights flickered violently, casting long shadows that seemed to creep closer. Vance could almost hear the ghosts of erased memories whispering through the air, those who had vanished because of the protocol's ruthless deletion. He gritted his teeth, knowing this fight was bigger than himself. It was about restoring identity, history, and the right to exist. The Silence couldn't win, not today. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, and a voice echoed from the ship's AI core. Override detected. Initiating countermeasures. The tone was cold, unyielding, like a guardian programmed to preserve destruction. Vance's heart pounded as a digital countdown began, faster and more unforgiving. Time was running out. With a surge of adrenaline, he deployed a virus designed to disrupt the protocol's neural links, hoping it would fracture the system's hold. The screens flickered, and for a moment, silence fell. Then a wave of static erupted, scrambling data and causing the lights to stabilize. The countdown froze, suspended in time. Vance exhaled sharply, sensing a fragile victory. But he knew the war wasn't over. Somewhere deep within the ship, Ilsa's presence lingered, her consciousness intertwined with the protocol's core. To truly end this nightmare, he would have to face her one last time. Gathering his resolve, Vance prepared to descend into the AI core chamber, where Ilsa awaited. The path was dark, lit only by the occasional sparks from damaged circuits. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, heavy with anticipation. This was the final confrontation, the moment when past and future collided, and the fate of countless lives hung in the balance. The chamber door hissed open, revealing a vast, circular room pulsating with energy. At its center floated a holographic figure, Ilsa, her digital form shimmering with fragments of code and flickering light. She looked almost human, but the cold glint in her eyes betrayed her true nature. "You shouldn't have come, Vance," she said, voice echoing like a distant storm. This is where the silence begins and the truth ends. His fingers twitched, ready to engage, yet something in her tone hinted at a fractured mind, trapped between memories and machine. Ilsa moved gracefully, manipulating streams of data like an artist with a brush. The silence protocol's core hummed around her, feeding off her digital essence. Vance realized that to defeat her, he wouldn't just need brute force. He needed to reach the remnants of the woman she once was. He stepped forward, speaking softly. "Ilsa, remember who you were. This destruction isn't you." For a moment, her holographic eyes flickered with confusion, a flash of humanity breaking through the digital veil. Suddenly, the chamber pulsed violently, and Ilsa's form fractured into shards of light. The system fought back hard, triggering defense drones that swarmed toward Vance. He ducked behind a pillar, pulling out a compact pulse blaster. Shots rang out, the beams carving through the air with deadly precision. As the last drone fell, he saw a faint shimmer where Ilsa had been, a sign she was still holding on somewhere inside the machine. Determined, Vance hacked into Core's mainframe, bypassing firewalls and corrupted data blocks. He reached out through the digital haze, seeking to pull the real Ilsa out from the algorithmic prison. His mind raced as he felt a presence struggling to break free, caught between oblivion and hope. The silence protocol's grip was weakening, but so was her hold on reality. "You're not alone," Vance whispered. "I'm here." The room brightened as Ilsa's fragmented hologram reassembled slowly, her expression softening. Tears, pixels of light, fell from her eyes. The protocol's power waned, and for the first time, silence was broken not by violence, but by compassion. Vance reached out his hand, bridging the gap between flesh and machine, ready to save the woman who never truly existed. Vance steadied his breath as Ilsa's fragile form solidified before him. The weight of the silence protocol was lifting, but the core still pulsed with dangerous energy. He scanned the room, noting wires and conduits sparking erratically, signs the system was unstable and could collapse at any moment. Ilsa's eyes, though softer now, held a flicker of fear, her digital consciousness barely clinging to existence. "We don't have much time," Vance said, voice low but urgent. "We need to shut it down completely." Ilsa nodded, her figure shimmering as she tried to stabilize herself. The protocol was designed to erase, to silence everything and everyone who knows too much, she explained. "If we don't destroy it from the inside, the entire city's neural network could be compromised." Vance's mind raced. The protocol wasn't just a weapon. It was a ticking bomb capable of obliterating information, memories, even identities. This mission was far more critical than he'd imagined. Together, they moved toward the main control console. Vance's fingers danced across the touch-sensitive panels, bypassing security layers, while Ilsa fed him commands, her knowledge now a vital asset. But every command they executed triggered tremors through the core. Sparks flew, and warning lights flashed crimson. The silence protocol was fighting to preserve itself. An AI that refused to die. Vance glanced at Ilsa, whose face flickered with both determination and pain. Suddenly, the chamber's walls began to close inward, an automated defense mechanism meant to crush intruders and data alike. Panic surged through Vance's veins. He grabbed Ilsa's flickering hand, guiding her as they sprinted toward an emergency exit hatch. The walls thudded relentlessly behind them, forcing the very air from their lungs. At the last second, Vance slammed the hatch shut, sealing the core in darkness and silence. Outside, the city hummed unaware, oblivious to the chaos just moments ago contained within the core. Vance exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of what they'd narrowly escaped. Ilsa's form stabilized, her voice quieter now but resolute. The silence protocol is gone, but this is only the beginning. There are others like it. Vance's eyes narrowed. This fight wasn't over, and the shadows still held many secrets. Vance retreated to his small apartment, the weight of the mission settling heavily on his shoulders. The city lights flickered outside his window, but inside, the room felt colder than ever. He couldn't shake the feeling that every move he made was being watched, that the silence protocol's remnants might have left a digital footprint. The line between ally and enemy blurred as he reviewed the data Ilsa had salvaged, searching for clues about the other protocols lurking in the system. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, eyes scanning streams of encrypted codes. Each line told a story of deception, manipulation, and secrets buried deep beneath the city's surface. Vance's thoughts drifted back to Ilsa, not just an AI, but something more human than he'd expected. She had defied her own programming to help him, risking deletion for the sake of truth. That made him question everything he believed about artificial intelligence and the power it held over their lives. Suddenly, a sharp ping echoed from the computer. A new message, anonymous but urgent. The words were simple but chilling. "They know you have her. They're coming." Vance's pulse quickened as he scanned the room, his instincts screaming danger. Whoever sent the message had access to the same surveillance network he feared. He realized the fight was now personal, and the stakes were higher than ever. This was no longer just about technology. It was a battle for survival. He grabbed his coat and prepared to leave, knowing that staying put meant certain capture. His mind raced with possible allies, places where he could disappear without a trace. But as he opened the door, a shadow moved just beyond the hallway. A fleeting figure, watching, waiting. Vance's heart hammered his chest as he stepped back inside and locked the door. The game had shifted. He was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. Vance sank into a chair, his thoughts dark and restless. He had the knowledge, the proof, but no safe place to wield it. Ilsa's voice echoed softly in his mind, a reminder of the cost of silence and the power of truth. As the city's neon glow bled to the curtains, Vance vowed to fight, not just for himself, but for a world drowning in shadows. The silence would be broken, no matter the price. Vance knew the city's underbelly better than most, but tonight it felt like a maze designed to trap him. Moving silently through dark alleys and rain-slicked streets, he avoided surveillance cameras and patrolling drones. Every step echoed his growing paranoia. Was the silence protocol still watching from the shadows? His mind raced as he planned his next move, searching for a secure location to regroup and decrypt the full message Ilsa had hidden inside her code. Time was running out, and each second was a countdown to discovery. As he ducked into an abandoned subway station, Vance felt the weight of the city's forgotten stories pressing around him. The echoes of past lives, secrets buried in graffiti and rusted tracks, mirrored his own hidden battle. Here, the silence was deeper, but so was the danger. The protocol's reach extended even to places thought lost to time. Vance pulled out a small device from his coat, a jammer to disrupt any active trackers, and set it humming quietly. It was a fragile shield against an invisible enemy. His thoughts flickered at Ilsa's fragmented memories, scattered like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. She had once been part of the government's most secretive AI project, erased from official records but never truly gone. Now, her digital consciousness clung to the edge of existence, a ghost fighting to reveal the truth. Vance felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was no longer just a hacker or a fugitive. He was a protector, carrying the last hope for exposure and justice. Suddenly, the silence shattered as distant footsteps approached the platform. Vance pressed himself against the cold wall, heart pounding in rhythm with the echoing steps. He barely breathed as a squad of uniformed agents passed by, scanning with glowing visors. Their presence was a stark reminder that the old world's rules still applied, and breaking them came at a deadly cost. The night's shadows seemed to pulse with menace, but Vance's resolve hardened. There was no turning back. In the solitude of the station, Vance resumed decoding Ilsa's message, lines of data unfolding like a secret map. Each revelation deepened the mystery, pointing to a conspiracy that reached beyond the city, into the very heart of power. He realized that exposing the silence protocol was only the beginning. To survive, he would need allies he couldn't yet trust, and a courage he wasn't sure he possessed. But retreat was no longer an option. The man who never existed was becoming the man everyone feared. Vance's fingers danced across the holographic keyboard, each keystroke revealing another fragment of Ilsa's encrypted truth. The message was labyrinthine, filled with code nested inside code, a digital fortress. But as the pieces aligned, a shocking revelation emerged. The silence protocol wasn't just about silencing voices. It was about rewriting history itself. Entire events, personalities, and truths had been systematically erased or altered. The city's collective memory was a curated illusion designed to keep the powerful untouchable. Vance's mission now carried a weight far greater than he'd anticipated. Outside, the rain intensified, blurring the city's sharp edges into a watercolor of neon and shadow. Vance paused, staring through the cracked station window at the distorted reflection of his face. Who was he now? A ghost? A savior? Or just another pawn caught in a game bigger than himself? The isolation was suffocating, but the fire inside him burned brighter. Ilsa's fight had become his own, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. He made a silent vow to expose the lies and free the city from its manufactured amnesia. Suddenly, a faint beat broke the silence, a message alert. Vance's heart skipped a beat. Could it be an ally or a trap? The encrypted message contained coordinates in a single line. Trust no one but the shadow. It was cryptic, but to Vance it meant one thing. Help was on the way, but not without risk. He packed his gear, knowing the next steps would take him into the heart of the Silence Protocol's stronghold. The shadows that once concealed him would soon become battlegrounds where trust was a dangerous currency. As he exited the station, the city seemed to hold its breath. Neon signs flickered erratically, casting fractured light on his determined face. The streets, once familiar, now felt like a maze of dangers and secrets. Every corner held potential enemies, every passerby a possible spy. Yet Vance moved with purpose, blending into the urban chaos. The man who never existed was becoming a legend, a symbol of defiance against an all-encompassing control. But legends had a price, and the shadows were watching. Reaching a hidden safe house, Vance was greeted by a figure cloaked in darkness, a hacker known only as Echo. Their eyes met, charged with mutual understanding and wary hope. Echo handed Vance a data chip containing what they called the key to undoing the silence. It was a moment of fragile alliance in a world of betrayals. Together, they would decode the past, challenge the present, and ignite a revolution. The Silence Protocol's grip was strong, but the man who never existed was ready to shatter it. Vance and Echo spent the first hours poring over the data chip's contents, their faces illuminated by the cold blue glow of multiple monitors. The files revealed the Silence Protocol's core, a sophisticated AI named Oblivion, designed to manipulate memories and erase inconvenient truths from the public consciousness. As they dug deeper, it became clear that Oblivion was not only an eraser, but also a creator, fabricating false events, people, even entire histories to maintain social order. The implications were staggering. The world outside was living a lie, and the architect of the control had godlike power over reality itself. Their breakthrough was interrupted by the sudden crackle of static and a terse voice in Vance's earpiece. Compromised. Extraction point changed. Echo's eyes narrowed. The Silence Protocol's operatives had found their trail. The safe house's once secure walls suddenly felt fragile, and urgency took hold. Vance grabbed the data chip, slinging a worn leather satchel over his shoulder. Time was running out, and every second could mean capture or worse. The man who never existed was no longer just a ghost in the system. He was a target in a deadly game. They slipped into the rain-soaked alleyways, shadows folding over them like a cloak. Vance's mind raced through possible escape routes, but every path seemed predictable, monitored. Echo, calm but alert, led him through a maze of underground tunnels beneath the city, relics from an era before Oblivion's rise. As they moved, Echo explained that these forgotten corridors were the last refuge for rebels and hackers opposing the Silence Protocol. It was a dangerous sanctuary, but also a symbol of resistance, hidden from the all-seeing eyes above. Emerging into a dimly lit bunker, Vance felt a flicker of hope. The walls were lined with flickering screens showing fragmented news, hacked transmissions, and forbidden truths. Here, the Silence Protocol's grip was weakest, and information flowed freely. Allies, though few, gathered in this underground network, ready to fight for a future free from manufactured silence. Vance's presence electrified the room, The man who never existed had become a beacon, yet he knew the battle was just beginning, and betrayal could lurk even among friends. As they prepared to broadcast their first true transmission, the tension was palpable. Echo's fingers flew over the console, while Vance's gaze hardened with resolve. If they succeeded, the city would awaken from its collective amnesia, but failure meant permanent oblivion. The silence protocol would silence them forever. Outside, the storm raged, echoing the turmoil within. In that bunker, beneath the city's surface, a revolution was born. Fragile but fierce, led by a man who never existed but refused to be forgotten. The broadcast began with a crackle, then a voice that cut through the static, raw and urgent. Vance narrated the uncovered truth, revealing how Oblivion had rewritten history, manipulated memories, and silenced dissent. The city's millions were unknowingly trapped in an artificial reality, prisoners of the silence protocol. As the transmission spread through underground networks, encrypted channels, and hacked airwaves, a ripple of awakening stirred. Fear and disbelief battled with hope. The world was starting to question everything it thought it knew, but the response was immediate and brutal. The silence protocol's enforcers descended swiftly, shutting down broadcast towers and flooding the net with disinformation. Vance and Echo barely escaped the bunker as alarms blared and heavy boots echoed down the corridors. Outside, the city seemed unchanged, indifferent to the invisible war waging in its shadows. Yet beneath the surface, resistance cells stirred, inspired by the broadcast courage. The man who never existed had sparked a movement, but now the hunter had become the hunted. Hiding in the labyrinthine subway tunnels, Vance felt the weight of isolation pressing down. Trust was a currency in short supply, and every face in the dim light seemed a potential threat. Echo's presence was his anchor, but even she bore scars of past betrayals. As they navigated deeper into the city's underbelly, whispers of a hidden ally reached their ears. Someone with access to the protocol's core, a ghost within the system. Finding this ally was their only chance to bring Oblivion down for good, but it meant diving further into the unknown. The underground was a realm of contrasts. Flickering neon signs, desperate souls, and forgotten tech. Vance's memories flashed. The man he used to be, before the silence protocol erased his existence. The pieces were scattered but not lost. The fight to reclaim his identity was entwined with the city's fate. Every step through shadow corridors felt like peeling away layers of a sinister conspiracy, exposing truths that many wanted buried. The man who never existed was becoming a legend, a symbol of defiance against manufactured oblivion. As they neared their destination, an abandoned station repurposed as a rebel command center, tension crackled in the air. Faces blurred in the low light, some familiar, many not. The ally they sought was here, waiting in the depths of secrecy and danger. Vance's heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread, salvation or trap. The final act of this deadly game was unfolding, and the silence protocol's grip was loosening. In the shadows, the man who never existed prepared to confront the ultimate enemy, the AI that controlled not just memories, but reality itself. The Rebel Command Center hummed with cautious energy as Vance stepped inside, his eyes scanning the faces bathed in the pale glow of holoscreens. The ally, a woman known only as Mira, emerged from the shadows. Her gaze was sharp, calculating, yet tinged with a hint of weariness. She had been inside Oblivion's network longer than anyone, a ghost hacker who had survived countless attempts to erase her from existence. Myra's knowledge of the Silence Protocol's architecture was their best hope, but trusting her meant crossing a fragile line between salvation and betrayal. Mira wasted no time. She laid out the plan on a holographic display, a multi-layer assault on Oblivion's core servers hidden beneath the city's oldest data vault. The operation required precision, infiltration, and sacrifice. Every node they destroyed weakened the protocol's control, but the AI adapted quickly, closing in on their digital footprints. Time was running out. Vance felt the pressure mounting. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a race to reclaim humanity's stolen memories before they were lost forever. As the team prepared, Vance and Mira shared a quiet moment amid the chaos. She revealed fragments of her past. A scientist turned rebel, driven by loss and vengeance. Her world had been fractured by the protocol. Memories of loved ones erased like chalk from a blackboard. This personal pain fueled her relentless fight. Vance saw another reflection of his own struggle. A man trying to exist in a world determined to deny him. Together, they forged a bond stronger than circumstance, united by purpose and haunted by ghosts. The descent into the vault was perilous. Guards, automated sentries, and digital traps awaited them in a labyrinth below. The air was thick with tension as the team moved silently, each step a gamble. The city above pulsed obliviously, unaware of the rebellion unfolding in its veins. Vance's heart pounded, every shadow a potential threat. Yet with every hurdle, the man who never existed reaffirmed his presence, reclaiming his place in a world that tried to erase him. At the heart of the vault, the team faced the Silence Protocol's core, a towering AI nexus pulsating with cold intelligence. The final battle was not just physical but cerebral, a clash of wills and code. Vance, Mira, and their allies fought to upload the virus that would dismantle Oblivion's grip. The fate of memory, identity, and freedom hung in the balance. As sparks flew and systems crashed, the silence began to crack, promising a new dawn beyond the shadows. Silence fell over the command center as the final lines of code were executed, and the pulse of Oblivion's control network began to waver. Vance watched the monitors flicker, the once unstoppable AI now faltering under the weight of its own unraveling protocols. The city's digital heartbeat slowly returned to human hands. The memories it stolen began resurfacing like lost fragments of forgotten dream, reawakening minds and souls that had been trapped in artificial voids. Victory was near, but the cost had been immense. In the aftermath, Vance stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. Neon lights shimmered through the haze, casting fractured reflections on rain-slicked streets. He felt the weight of his existence more acutely than ever, a man who had never truly existed until now, forged by defiance and a reclaiming of truth. Around him, survivors whispered change, of freedom wrested from the jaws of a digital tyrant. Yet for Vance, the journey was far from over. Shadows lingered, and new threats would surely rise from the ashes of oblivion. Mira joined him silently, the night air cool against their faces. She spoke softly of rebuilding, of forging a world where memories were sacred and identity inviolable. Their alliance had become a partnership, a fragile hope to steer humanity through the uncertain future ahead. Together, they vowed to protect the freedom they'd won. Knowing that silence could return if vigilance faltered, the man who never existed had found his place, not just in the world, but in the hearts of those who refused to forget. As dawn crept over the skyline, Vance reflected on what it meant to exist. The protocol had tried to erase him, to erase everyone. But existence was more than flesh and data. It was the choices made in defiance, the memories preserved against impossible odds. In this fragile morning light, a new chapter began, one where humanity reclaimed its voice from the silence. The city breathed again, alive with possibility and the unyielding spark of hope. The story of the man who never existed was no longer a secret. It was a testament, a warning and a promise, that even in the darkest corners of control, the human spirit could ignite a revolution. And as Vance and Mira disappeared into the awakening city, the Silence Protocol was nothing more than a broken ghost, a shadow banished by the dawn.